Good morning and welcome back to the channel. I appreciate you signing in. We're going to continue with 1 Kings, but before we continue, our morning prayer. Father, as I read and receive your word, may it deeply be rooted in me, so when difficulty comes, it will be your word that encourages and strengthens me. Amen. So we're going on to chapter 6 today. Solomon builds the temple. It was in mid-spring, during the 4th year of Solomon's reign, that he began the construction of the temple of the Lord. This was 480 years after the people of Israel were delivered from slavery in the land of Egypt. The temple that King Solomon built for the Lord was 90 feet long, 30 feet wide, and 45 feet high. The foyer at the front of the temple was 30 feet wide, running across the entire width of the temple. It projected outward 15 feet from the front of the temple. Solomon also made narrow, recessed windows throughout the temple. A complex of rooms was built against the outer walls of the temple, all the way around the sides and rear of the building. The complex was 3 stories high, the bottom floor being 7.5 feet wide, the second floor 9 feet wide, and the top floor 10.5 feet wide. The rooms were connected to the walls of the temple by beams resting on ledges built out from the wall, so the beams were not inserted into the walls themselves. Okay. The stones used in the construction of the temple were pre-finished at the quarry, so the entire structure was built without the sound of a hammer, axe, or any other iron tool at the building site. The entrance to the bottom floor was on the south side of the temple. There were winding stairs going up to the second floor, another flight of stairs between the second and third floors. After completing the temple structure, Solomon put in a ceiling made of beams and planks of cedar. As already stated, there was a complex of rooms on 3 sides of the building. Attached to the temple was a complex of rooms on 3 sides of the building, attached to the temple walls by cedar timbers. Each story of the complex was 7.5 feet high. Then the Lord gave this message to Solomon. Concerning this temple you are building, if you keep all my laws and regulations and obey all my commands, I will fulfill through you this promise I made to your father David. I will live among the people of Israel and never forsake my people. The temple's interior. So Solomon finished building the temple. The entire inside, from floor to ceiling, was paneled with wood. He paneled the walls and ceilings with cedar, and he used cypress for the floors. He partitioned off an inner sanctuary, the most holy place, at the far end of the temple. It was 30 feet deep and was paneled with cedar from floor to ceiling. The main room of the temple, outside the most holy place, was 60 feet long. Cedar paneling completely covered the stone walls throughout the temple, and the paneling was decorated with carvings of gourds and open flowers. Solomon prepared the inner sanctuary in the rear of the temple, where the Ark of the Lord's Covenant would be placed. This inner sanctuary was 30 feet long, 30 feet wide, and 30 feet high. Solomon overlaid its walls and ceilings with pure gold. He also overlaid the altar made of cedar. Then he overlaid the rest of the temple's interiors with pure gold, and he made gold chains to protect the entrance to the most high holy place. So he finished overlaying the entire temple with gold, including the altar that belonged to the most holy place. Within the inner sanctuary, Solomon placed 2 cherub made of olive wood, each 15 feet tall. The wingspan of each of the cherub was 15 feet, each wing being 7.5 feet long. The 2 cherub were identical in shape and size. Each was 15 feet tall. Solomon placed them side by side in the inner sanctuary of the temple. Their outspread wings reached from the wall to wall, while their inner wings touched at the center of the room. He overlaid the 2 cherub with gold. All the walls of the inner sanctuary and the main room were decorated with carvings of cherubim. Sorry, I had to walk away for a second. Within the inner sanctuary, Solomon placed 2 cherubim made of olive wood, each 15 feet tall. The wingspan of each of the cherubim was 15 feet, each wing being 7.5 feet long. The 2 cherubim were identical in the shape and size. Each was 15 feet tall. Solomon placed them side by side in the sanctuary of the temple. Their outspread wings reached from wall to wall, while the inner wings touched the center of the room. He overlaid the 2 cherubim with gold. All the walls of the inner sanctuary and the main room were decorated with carvings of cherubim, palm trees, and open flowers. The floor in both rooms was overlaid with gold. For the entrance of the inner sanctuary, Solomon made double doors of olive wood with 5-sided doorposts. These doors were decorated with carvings of cherubim, palm trees, and open flowers, and the doors were overlaid with gold. Then he made 4-sided doorposts of olive wood for the entrance to the temple. There were 2 folding doors of cypress wood, and each door was hinged to fold back upon itself. These doors were decorated with carvings of cherubim, palm trees, and open flowers, and the doors were overlaid with gold. The walls of the inner courtyard were built so that there was 1 layer of cedar beams, 1 every 3 layers of hewn stone. The foundation of the Lord's temple was laid in mid-spring of the 4th year of Solomon's reign. The entire building was completed in every detail by mid-autumn of the 11th year of his reign. So it took 7 years to build the temple. Chapter 7. Solomon built his palace. Solomon also built a palace for himself, and it took him 13 years to complete the construction. One of Solomon's buildings was called the Palace of the Forest of Lebanon. It was 150 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 45 feet high. The great cedar ceiling beams rested on the 4 rows of cedar pillars. It had a cedar roof supported by 45 rafters that rested on 3 rows of pillars, 15 in each row. On each of the 45 rafters that rested on 3 rows of pillars, 15 in each row. On each of the side walls there were 3 rows of windows facing each other. All the doorways were rectangular in frame. They were in sets of 3 facing each other. He also built the Hall of Pillars, which was 75 feet long and 45 feet wide. There was a porch at its front, covered by a canopy that was supported by pillars. There was also a Hall of the Throne, also known as the Hall of Judgment, where Solomon sat to hear legal matters. It was paneled with cedar from floor to ceiling. Solomon's living quarters surrounded a courtyard behind this hall. They were built the same way. He also built similar living quarters for Pharaoh's daughter, one of his wives. All 3 buildings were built entirely from huge, costly blocks of stone, cut and trimmed to exact measure on all sides. Some of the huge foundation stones were 15 feet long, and some were 12 feet long. The costly blocks of stone used in the walls were also cut to measure, and cedar beams were also used. The walls of the great courtyard were built so that there was 1 layer of cedar beams after every 3 layers of hewn stone, just like the walls of the inner courtyard of the Lord's temple with its entrance foyer. Furnishings for the temple. King Solomon then asked for a man named Hiram to come from Tyre, for he was a craftsman skilled in bronze work. He was half Israelite, since his mother was a widow from the tribe of Naphtali, and his father had been a foundry worker from Tyre. So he came to work for King Solomon. Hiram cast 2 bronze pillars, each 27 feet tall and 18 feet in circumference. For the tops of the pillars he made capitals of molded bronze, each 7.5 feet tall. Each capital was decorated with 7 sets of latticework and interwoven chains. He also made 2 rows of pomegranates that encircled the latticework to decorate the capitals over the pillars. The capitals on the columns inside the foyer were shaped like lilies, and they were 6 feet tall. Each capital on the 2 pillars had 200 pomegranates in 2 rows around them. Besides the round surface next to the latticework, Hiram set the pillars at the entrance of the temple, one toward the south and one toward the north. He named the one on the south Jachin, and one on the north Boaz. The capitals on the pillars were shaped like lilies, and so the work on the pillars were finished. Then Hiram cast a large round tank, 15 feet across from rim to rim. It was called the Sea. It was 7.5 feet deep and about 45 feet in circumference. The sea was encircled just below its rim by 2 rows of decorative gourds. There were about 6 gourds per foot all the way around, and they had been cast as part of the tank. The sea rested on a base of 12 bronze oxen, all facing outward. 3 faced north, 3 faced west, and 3 faced south, and 3 faced east. The walls of the sea were about 3 inches thick, and its rim flared out like a cup and reassembled a lily blossom. It could hold about 11,000 gallons of water. Hiram also made 10 bronze water carts, each 6 feet long, 6 feet wide, and 4.5 feet tall. They were constructed... Sorry about that. I totally lost my place with that. Cats and dogs. I can't help it. They chase each other. I lost my spot. Hiram set the pillars at the entrance of the temple, one toward the south, one toward the north. Oh, okay, I did read that. They were shaped like lilies, and so the work on the pillars was finished. Then Hiram cast a large round tank, 15 feet across from rim to rim. It was called the Sea. It was 7.5 feet deep and about 45 feet in circumference. The sea was encircled just below its rim by 2 rows of decorative gourds. There were about 6 gourds per foot all the way around, and they had been cast as part of the tank. The sea rested on a base of 12 bronze oxen, all facing outward. 3 faced north, 3 faced west, and 3 faced south, and 3 faced east. The walls of the sea were about 3 inches thick, and its rim flared out like a cup and resembled a lily blossom. It could hold about 11,000 gallons of water. I can't do this anymore.